Struggle, desperation, failure. When one takes action, the pain and burden they risk becomes proportional to the task they set out to accomplish. Luffy set out to become Pirate King, and his claims that he would accomplish it earn him words of disbelief in the supposedly impossible task. And on that road he walks, there is one moment in particular I find fascinating. One stumble on his journey that changed the entire course of his adventure. Sabaody Archipelago. Because at this moment, unlike so many others, where Luffy took impossible odds in the eye and refused to blink, here, when face down with PX-1 and Sentomaru, he shut his eyes at those odds and turned away. After one loss to Lucci, he still had the courage to tell him, "What do you know about impossible?" Even after seeing Aokiji's overwhelming power, he still fought against him. Even after Sabaody, he ran headfirst at the likes of Magellan or even all three Marine Admirals with reckless abandon. The dilemma is one of effort and failure. But before we can fully view the moment for what it is, the perspective first needs to be broadened on how the story as a whole views weakness, failure, defeat, and perhaps most importantly, the will to take action. Luffy, on some level, ran away at Sabaody because he was weak. He did not have the power to overcome his opposition and gave up without throwing a punch. But there's something to say about having the strength to make the attempt even if, from the outside, the possibility of success seems like zero. And when One Piece approaches this idea, it calls attention to a certain mechanic of its world, the miracle. The will to persist and try no matter what in achieving one's goals is so often seen as irrational, but One Piece oftentimes rewards its characters for making that attempt regardless. Persistence is Luffy's greatest power. Even with his death imminent on Logtown, he still stated his goal, his ambition. Even when he could only look forward by shouting his dream, he still smiled as he did so, and the miracle happened. If you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, then by daring to take the shot, there's always the smallest chance of victory. Even when it's lucky, it's not random. The miracle only happens because one never gives up in the first place. But though they can take the form of random quirks of fate, more often than not, it isn't chance that defines them. In the climax of Impel Down, when the breakout crew jumped into the sea, they are saved by something at once completely coming from the blind side, but at the same time, clear as day. The whale sharks serve as the miracle to save them, but they are a miracle made and earned through trust and daring. Jinbei was the one who said they should jump because he knew they would be saved. But from the perspective of the breakout team who had Magellan at their backs and the deadly expanse of ocean in front of them, it was madness. Even in that dire situation, Luffy pushed everyone forward, making the miracle happen through action. There was no randomness whatsoever, simply the distinction between making the leap or not. And Luffy is the one who will take that leap. As long as he keeps going forward, he can have a chance to accomplish what he wants. Each of his crew members was one who was too weighed down to charge for their dream, but Luffy freed them of their burdens so they could fight for their desires. Kobe feared the risks in aiming to achieve his dream, and Luffy looked down on him until he braved danger to stand up for his hope. Perceived weakness is not a barrier to success if the will to try can lead to impossible accomplishments. Because if one has the strength to make the first and most difficult step, then they aren't truly weak. Strength of conviction can supersede weakness, because like the weak can have the slightest chance of success, the strong will always lose if they fail to see their victory and surrender. The miracle in achieving what should have been impossible is a cornerstone of media evident in the prevalence of underdog fiction. Those who try against all odds because of what they believe in or what they are fighting for. It's even core in Japanese symbolism through the tiger and dragon, something One Piece even calls attention to. The dragon serves as a symbol of imperial rule, the dominant and immutable power, where the tiger is the one who resists that rule, who dares challenge despite being weaker. When the dragon becomes complacent and stagnant, the tiger engages the dragon to restore that balance. Not only is Luffy easy to read as a symbolic tiger, challenging dragon after dragon, but in one example it's outright, with former slave but powerful fighter Fisher Tiger toppling Mary Joas, the home of the Heavenly Dragons, the picture of stagnation and complacency, who tout themselves as gods through the political power they wield. It might seem insane to challenge the dragon who seems so powerful, But to restore balance, the world needs a tiger to dare and try despite those odds. And yet, the simple act of trying isn't always enough. Even though the setting of One Piece pushes for that effort through miracles, one cannot discuss effort without bringing up the risk of failure. Because the miracle won't always happen. That's why it's a miracle. And when it comes to One Piece and failure, as good a place to start as any would be Luffy's first defeat as an adult in the story, his battle against Crocodile, the man who crushed Luffy not once but twice, and for one simple reason. Arrogance is common in the antagonists because they come from a place of power where Luffy is striving from beneath, but arrogance is something Luffy himself had on full display here. It's not unwarranted. For the bulk of the series thus far, Luffy was never pushed anywhere close to his physical limits. His foes were far weaker than him, and if any limit was tested, it was his anger, a switch that, when flipped, led to the swift defeat of anyone who fell on his wrong side. Even when faced with Crocodile himself, he had no reason to fear him initially because Luffy was naive to the reality of his place in the world. Luffy is a man who does not view things with pretensions in mind. He heard of how fearful the likes of Krieg, Arlong, or even the supposedly insurmountable Grand Line were, yet he'd triumphed time and time again, and Crocodile had no reason to be any different. And that's where Luffy's confidence became arrogance. He goofed off when he had the advantage. He ended up putting weird things in his mouth. Luffy, who didn't know such failure, fell in battle twice to one who did. Crocodile, in a sense, was an echo of Luffy's future, grown where Luffy remained a child. He had known failure to Whitebeard where Luffy would know defeat to plenty stronger than him. And in recognizing their weakness, they both came to master and hone their Devil Fruit, which is exactly how Crocodile came to win out on Luffy the second time. Because Luffy showed arrogance, born from his lack in experiencing true failure, he lost to someone he'd always had the strength to beat, but not the drive. He had to overcome his personal weakness and take his opponent seriously, recognizing Crocodile not as another tyrant to knock down, but a legitimate foe in the way of his goals. Failure is more than likely if one seeks to achieve anything, as both Luffy and Crocodile came to experience from each other. There is no shortcut, no easy way to get past failure. That difficulty breeds a fear of trying in the first place, of making that effort, because when one fails, they risk wasting all of their efforts and willpower in death or defeat. And so, at the risk of losing, they ran. Now with the understanding of how One Piece treats the will to try, we can see why Luffy's actions are a failure where his rivals succeed. The supernovas serve as foils to Luffy's own journey on this small stretch of the story, arriving at Sabaody with the same goal of reaching the New World, something they achieved where Luffy would not for 2 years. Simply put, this was the result of the question Sabaody called attention to. What does it take to reach the New World? Kid gives the answer, stating that only those who can say they will become Pirate King are fit for those waters. But while Luffy had been saying that since the beginning of the story, as established, actions matter more than words, or even outright success. If Luffy ran because he believed himself to be weak, then what of the supernovas who were weak? Apu, Hawkins, Uruj, and Drake all fell in battle to Kizaru and a Pacifista, a force more dangerous than the one Luffy fled from. But the narrative still rewarded them for their efforts, a miracle taking Kizaru out of their hair and allowing them to escape, to overcome their failure and ultimately reach the New World. Luffy's defeat was in small part because he refused to try and overcome, but in that, he was running from something specific. There are times where retreat is acceptable. In Impel Down, Luffy and Blackbeard came face to face, but while they are rivals for the throne of Pirate King, their respective goals in saving Ace or reaching Impel Down's lowest level would not benefit from their fight, so they part ways. Same with Big Mom. Luffy wants to beat Kaido first, and having gotten the Poneglyph rubbings, Sanji, and saving the Vinsmokes, they'd accomplished all they set out to. But the battle on Sabaody had a different connotation. The crew arrived without the intent of starting trouble, and if they hadn't, then things might have been calm. But when trouble found them, Luffy retaliated. He knew exactly what he did in punching St. Charlos and calling a Marine Admiral there. He knew exactly how strong the Admirals were from his encounter with Aokiji, and even with that in mind, he made his choice, bringing a fight on his crew that they could not avoid. But Luffy did not respond to this helpless situation as he did so many times before and after. He retreated from a fight he'd started, not just running from danger, but running from the new world. Where those weaker than him fought and succeeded through conviction, Luffy could not find that strength and confidence he had in abundance at so many other points in the story. Even had they escaped, would they really have been rewarded with victory despite the lack of will to try? Would they have escaped marine notice for 3 days despite being found in just a few short hours? We can never truly know. But what we do know is that Luffy didn't try to overcome Sentomaru and the Pacifista, and to explain why, I want to bring up another contradiction. One pointed out by fans internationally in his words to Vivi, where he insisted people die. Yet sometime later, his mind shattered at the Paramount War, when a person died and he could not bear it. What took Luffy and Vivi to that moment was the crisis of Alabasta that put a heavy weight on her shoulders. Vivi could not stand to see that which she cared about suffer, and so she fought to save her country. And to do so, she would deal with the rebels and avoid mass bloodshed. She fought for her goal, but in taking that course of action, she'd overlooked her comrades. She sought only to risk herself, keeping everyone else safe, because she didn't want others to be hurt protecting her like the Sand banned so many years ago. On her path forward, where she risked only herself, no one would die. But as Luffy pointed out, stopping the rebels won't stop Crocodile. He insisted that her choice was wrong, as she was putting everything on her shoulders, ultimately running from Crocodile despite the fact that she wanted him beaten more than anyone. But she didn't have the strength to stop Crocodile, and as a leader she did not want to risk the lives of her friends. But her friends did have strength, and they were reliable. Luffy pushed her to put all their lives on the line, and through trusting them she was able to see the end of Crocodile's scheme. But ironically, though he happened to be correct, Luffy himself was naive in his own way. He was correct in that Vivi had to rely on others rather than bear her burden alone. But the Luffy that called her naive was one who had not experienced even the failure of defeat at the hands of Crocodile, let alone the likes of Magellan, Aokiji, Sabaody, or the war. Luffy was not saying, rely on your friends. Luffy was saying, rely on me. Something he would continue to say, not in words, but in actions. Like Vivi was putting everything on herself to protect everything, Luffy did very much the same. When he put his all into fighting Crocodile, Lucci, Aokiji, Moria, and Magellan, it was out of a desire to protect the family important to him. Crocodile had to be beaten to save Alabasta. Lucci had to be beaten to save Robin. Aokiji was far beyond the level of the monster trio, but Luffy still fought him alone so that even if he died, his crew might live. Such an action was suicidal, but his will to fight earned him respect from his opponent, who gave up on his goal. His will to try was rewarded by the story in Aokiji's concession, but it still revealed a weakness in Luffy that he had to make up for. More than ever he'd come to see how weak he was, so he made up for his weakness through sacrifice. Gear's second chipped away at his very lifespan with every use, yet he used it anyway, because that lifespan meant nothing to him if he couldn't save his comrades. After using the even more dangerous combination of gears to stop Moria, his crew even began to realize the risks. Luffy was putting his body on the line to protect them against powerful enemies, and they feared what might happen when up against even stronger foes yet to come. Zoro hid the results of Kuma's arrival from him, not wanting to worry the captain with the burden he shouldered to make up for their collective weakness. Yet it was him who burdened Luffy after they defeated the Pacifista. He was the one who pointed out that another fight would likely get them hurt, admitting the weakness he was more than aware of given the sacrifice he had to make because of how weak they were. And that sacrifice continued to drain their collective efforts even then. So close to the New World, Luffy had come to know that he was weaker than he'd thought he'd been back at Alabasta. He'd believed he could protect his comrades by sacrificing his life, by prevailing because of those sacrifices. But sacrifice is only a short-term solution to a long-term problem. The Straw Hats were weak and in deep over their head, and with 2 opponents in front of them, Luffy could not simply sacrifice himself to save everything he cared about. Even if he stopped one foe, there would still be a second, maybe a third. Their enemies were uncountable. Everyone's concerns never stopped being applicable. Anyone could have gotten seriously hurt at any time before. The Admiral could be on them at any time. But when Zoro made his concerns known, he admitted to Luffy that he, the second strongest of the crew, was weak. And that extended to everyone. But Luffy had come to know that he was weak too. Luffy couldn't push them to fight because he didn't want them hurt. And he couldn't sacrifice himself to save them either. So he ran. They split up into 3 groups to escape 2 foes, Luffy making this concession in hopes that even one person could be saved, but he couldn't account for everyone else's feelings. No one wanted to lose anything, and everyone was willing to make the sacrifice to prevent the worst case scenario. Zoro told Usopp and Brook to leave him behind, Sanji and Brook offered themselves to protect him, and all the while Luffy couldn't focus on his own battles due to his fears for their safety. Their weakness revealed a lack of unity, mutual desires to protect, leading to mutually assured destruction when they were all willing to give up their lives to help the others. Luffy was willing to die without regret as long as he marched to his dream, but his life wasn't all he had to lose.
だって他に頼りがいねえ。風車村には帰れねえし、お前を追いかけなかったら俺は一人になる。一人になるのはいてよりつれえ。
Luffy wanted to become Pirate King, but to do so at the expense of his comrades would be worse than the pain of the sacrifices he was willing to make to achieve that. In their weakness, he took everything on himself, viewing them as support. Throughout the entirety of the story before the time skip, Luffy never relied on the strength of anyone else, even when he had Whitebeard's crew by his side. He never asked of anyone to do his task for him, and when he did ask for help, it was for support. If he could not move, he would ask for help to get back up so that he could keep moving again. At times he received help, not because he asked for it, but because others chose to help him of their own volition, inspired by his will to try that rested at the core of the narrative. Luffy could not cut, steal, or lie, but he can beat anyone who makes his comrades suffer. Even when he stumbled, he was still able to get up. But that's exactly why the others came to rely on him too much. He had to defeat Lucci, Crocodile, Naru, Arlong, because no one else could. In the end, it was always Luffy who saved the day. He wanted to become Pirate King, the man who stands above all others, and to do that he would have to be the strongest. That was all it would take to become king, right? Usopp once naively thought so, but will and strength alone don't cut it. The Pirate King needs a following, political power to stand tall in a world of kings. But Luffy had tried to stand alone. He had to be the one to fight, to save, to protect everything, because he was the strongest, but also the one who feared losing more than anything. If he let someone else fight in his place for that which he wanted most of all, and they failed, how could he ever forgive himself? But because he could not rely on those he called family, he was no different than Devil Diaz, a minor character who showed up at the start of Sabaody to drive home why Luffy was not ready for the new world, as Sentomaru said he wasn't. Because Diaz cried out that he would not go into the new world out of a desire to be with his family. They both let go of that dream so they could try and hold on to what was close to them, and met defeat as a result. Luffy and the Straw Hats were only protected by virtue of a miracle. Luffy's desire to protect his crew had others stepping in to help him, but it was because he needed to be protected that he was not ready for the new world where the likes of Drake and Hawkins were. And the burden Luffy took on himself with his crew is only more apparent in the war, where Luffy was running at even stronger opposition than just Sentomaru and the Pacifista, something he could do freely because there was no one behind him he had to protect. But he wasn't ready for the new world. Not yet. He'd failed. But failure is something that needs to be moved on from. Shanks mentally stating this when thinking of Luffy's burden. It was a crushing loss, but agonizing over one's failure only brings pain. Luffy's pain was so great that becoming Pirate King no longer meant anything, because in his clouded mind he was alone. But in recognizing the family he still had, the fact that he was not alone, only then could he pick himself back up and try again. One can recognize that they need to improve themselves or tackle the problem from a different angle, but neither approach means a thing if not backed by the will to try. Failure isn't the end as long as you are ready to take another step. Luffy and the Straw Hats were able to pick themselves up from their failure at Sabaody, and that ability to go forward became their power. turning the locations they were sent to in their defeat into regions to train themselves and grow stronger. But there's something perhaps insidious in the simple desire to move forward. Failure is an educator, but the lesson one takes from it isn't always the correct one. That realization makes failure warp into something even more dangerous, as even in taking the impossible step of getting up after defeat, one can still be set up to lose in the future and not even know it. And this very well might have been Luffy's fate. Because even though his failures at Sabaody and the war were in his inability to recognize his lack of trust in others to protect themselves, what he took from those failures was simply the fact that he was weak. It took him so long to admit it, but he was behind where Ace and his crew showed that they knew him better than he knew himself. Ace put his life on the line for Luffy because he had been alone, but as he told Jinbei, he would not have to fear for Luffy's sake as long as he had his crew. And that very crew had understood Luffy's failure so well in hearing the result of the actions he took alone. They had come to recognize the burden he put on himself because they had been weak, previously thinking Luffy could become Pirate King alone. They had to become strong so that Luffy no longer had to fear for their sake. However, while they had all become stronger, the one who made Luffy see the error in his line of thinking was not any of the Straw Hats, but Shirahoshi. During the crisis of Fishman Island, Luffy said with certainty that he would protect everything. He had the strength and will, he just needed to actualize it. But in attempting to do so, he still needed sacrifice. To save Fishman Island and protect everything he could, he attempted to sacrifice Noah, the connection to a past promise that remained unfulfilled. Alone, Luffy would have been able to save the island. He was certainly strong enough to destroy Noah, but he wouldn't have been able to fulfill his assertion that he could protect everything, had it not been for Shirahoshi calling upon her power to stop Noah herself before Luffy destroyed it. And it's key that it was Shirahoshi, because she was someone who Luffy had dismissed as a weak crybaby. But even that weak person could accomplish what Luffy couldn't do alone. It was only with others that Luffy could come to protect everything. And nowhere has this change been more apparent than on Whole Cake Island. Pressed on multiple fronts, the crew was smaller than ever and once again in a desperate situation. One where they had to put their all in on a moment-to-moment basis just to survive. But even when pressed, Luffy did not bow to the pressure. He took Katakuri out of the battle to protect his comrades, but in doing so he left them in the reach of Big Mom, and dozens of other threatening foes that would hound them in the hours before they could reunite. It's mentioned several times by the Big Mom pirates, even by Katakuri himself, that running would be the smart choice, and nothing to be ashamed of. And it's a choice that the Luffy of Sabaody would have likely made. By leaving Katakuri trapped in the mirror world and rushing to the side of his comrades, he could help them against the threats they were pressed by. But he didn't take that option. Here he was able to rely on them to fend for themselves, recognizing their strength and ability where before he'd put himself above them. He recognized his own weakness, but instead of retreating or attempting to sacrifice himself, he stayed and fought, intending to get stronger. Finally, he was able to find a compromise between his desire to fight and try at all times, his desire to protect the crew, and the recognition of his limits, as he fought a stronger foe without arrogance or the willingness to sacrifice himself. If he showed weakness, his crew might endanger themselves to protect him like they did on Sabaody, so he resisted that. And in staying and fighting, he gained power, Snake Man encapsulating his persistence with every punch. When Luffy falls, he simply gets back up. When Luffy misses, he simply punches again. Because in order to become Pirate King, one must persevere over everything, both over those who oppose you and your own failure. Luffy failed at the war, the crew failed at Sabaody, but they recovered from that failure and kept going, making their return. They fought their battles without a hint of desperation, only the desire to press forward, and those around them chose to fight alongside them without being asked. That's what it means to be a man of action. Oda says in the Volume 54 SBS that he avoided giving Luffy internal monologues or thought bubbles, because he wants to impress upon the audience that Luffy is a man who takes action above all else. To take action is how one moves on past failure, and Oda's views on this are made clear in the SBS of Volume 4. Oda explains, why doesn't Luffy kill his enemies? Because in that era, everyone uses their lives to fight for their dreams. For an enemy, when their dream has been shattered, it is the same as losing a fight, and as painful as death. I believe, for a pirate not to kill an enemy, it's giving them a second chance to fight for their dreams. All characters have the equal opportunity to take action, fail, and try again. But if they give up, then that's the end of their dream. But there are those who continue to try, finding new dreams, new goals to push towards. One Piece is a story all about putting one's effort in to achieve their goals. Synonymous with the title is Luffy's ambition of Pirate King, a childish dream he continues to hold on to and fight for as an adult. All the Straw Hats still carry within them those childish dreams, each of them echoing an impossible task: the undiscovered All Blue, the greatest swordsman, a map of the world, a coward becoming brave. It doesn't make sense at all to follow your dreams. You'll fail, you'll give up, it won't be worth it. The world around them jeers at impossibility because those who jeer are too afraid to try, too afraid to fail to be free of that fear. But sometimes they're simply not free, or too weak to accomplish what they want. Sometimes, when a dream can't be accomplished, it can be passed on through inherited will. When one isn't free to accomplish their dreams, it's the greatest tragedy of all. Luffy knew that pain, and so he ensures those who dream have the freedom to do so. Even though Kobe's goal opposed his, he still inspired him to fight for what he wants. The weak, normal boy finding the strength to become the man he wanted to be. And in that, he gained something special. With Kobe being helped by so many for his persistence, it might be called a miracle. Luffy, Garp, Shanks. His will to try gave him the impossible. But not only that, it's a special power noted in Luffy himself by the likes of Mihawk and Doflamingo. The power to gather allies behind you may be the most dangerous ability in the world, but it's not one just unique to Luffy. It's the same as Ivanko's miracle. Kobe, Buggy, Enru, Garasu, all of them brought allies into their pace as they fought for what they believed in and refused to give up. And if someone normal like Kobe could do it, anyone can. Rayleigh states that Haki, literally meaning ambition, is a power that everyone is capable of. But so few realize they have it. Everyone has the potential to achieve their goals. Maybe not alone, but they must try first. Luffy simply made that ability seem special because he is the one who moves forward first, dragging all others behind him, into following their foolish dreams right alongside him. And in recognizing the strength of those who follow him, he becomes stronger for it. If he really wants to achieve this, he has to take action, to move forward, to never give up. Those who oppose him would be grateful for his failure, because that would mean one less rival standing in their way. So Luffy has to overcome them. Overcome his failure and find strength where they surrender in theirs. To put in his efforts despite the possibility of failure. Only then can Luffy be the most free. The one who can protect what he wants to. The one who can ensure those he cares about can strive for their own ambitions. The one who will become king. Thank you for watching yet another video. This one was brought to you by patrons such as Flarbu, Moz, Gloogle, Tengoon, The Sewer Boy, Luis Segura, and Mohammed Akim. As usual, there's more to come, so I'll be sure to see you next time.